All right, so today we're going to be talking about making contact before you communicate something of importance. So this is a big one that often we get frustrated because we're trying to talk to our husbands or our children and then they don't listen to us, but actually they're not aware that we're even trying to talk to them. So I once heard from Mashi Lipska years ago, she was a Rebbitzin, was talking about marriage, but she was saying timing is everything. When you want to say something to your husband, timing is everything. You know, often we do it when they're on their way out or on their way in or they're tired or whatever, and it's a general principle that good communication timing is everything. And the same thing here, make contact before you communicate. Make sure that that person is present before you're communicating, because often we feel they're not listening or they're being, like with kids, we think they're being naughty, but they are in their game, they're not even hearing what we're saying to them. So before speaking to Adam about his transgression, God said, "Where are you?" And with Cain, he first asked, "Where is Abel, thy brother?" The Almighty obviously knew the answer to these questions, because he knew where Adam was. However, he demonstrated an important principle. Before making a direct confrontation, find out where the person is mentally. He may be physically present, but a person is where his thoughts are. People are generally preoccupied with their own thoughts and feelings. If you have something important to say and you want someone to listen to you, you have to take a moment to find out if he or she is with you and not thinking about the bank or some other place. By first mentioning some words of endearment or endorsement, others may respond more quickly. I always give the parenting example. You know, your child is playing in the sandpit outside and you're yelling at the door dinner time, but they're not hearing, and then you get furious and I've called you 3 times already, but really the child was playing. And so I always tell parents, walk up to the child, make eye contact, tap them on the shoulder, and make sure they've heard before you label them as naughty or difficult, because they just weren't listening. But it's the same with everybody. Like Hashem said, where are you? You know, where are you mentally? Are you ready to hear what I have to say? That is very, very important. So as an example, she has an example to her wife. That was a great meal. How was your day? Or how was your day? Are you in the mood to talk about these bills? If not, when would be a good time? So just because we're ready to blurt it out or we want to say something doesn't mean the other person is ready to hear it. And so a part of being an adult is this ability to delay gratification. That often we're desperate to say something, but the time is not right, and we need to be able to control ourselves and wait until the time is right, because often just blurting it out actually causes more problems. Being impulsive causes more problems. It's one of the issues with people with ADHD is that they're very impulsive. So they interrupt or they can't wait and they say the wrong thing, and it causes problems in inverted commas. But the ability to wait and think about it, take a few days before you respond, you're going to communicate much, much better. But also to be sure, as I say, so much of our important communication with our family members is done on the run or driving in the car. Nobody's in the same mood as you. So really thinking about, this is an important message, or I really want to be heard, when is a good time? And to set it up, when is a good time? Ask, is this a good time to talk? Are you fully present? Do not be surprised if you meet people who seem unable to make anything but superficial contact. Unfortunately, it's a common experience, usually stemming from severe childhood trauma. Being in temper over their inability to relate will not help either of you. Be accepting. If there's hope for change, that is the only way to get it. So we mentioned this a while ago, that people have different needs. She calls them meta needs. Some people are really good at deep and meaningful conversations, and other people aren't, or they just don't enjoy them. So she's saying, let's say you have something important you want to say to someone, and you might ask them, are you ready for the conversation? So you're doing all the right things, but actually they're never going to be ready because mentally they're not there. And in this case, it doesn't mean mentally they're not present in the room with you. It means that she's saying because of their trauma or whatever, they can't really engage in this kind of a discussion. And so it doesn't help to get upset about people who are like that, to understand that probably that you're never going to be able to discuss those issues with them. And the important thing, as we had an example that was given tonight, is that not to judge someone and condemn them. So sometimes it's so easy to go, they're so limited, or I think they're a personality disorder, or they're dysfunctional. We love to get into condemning. This way it's just to go, I have a need to talk about it, but that other person, we don't seem to be able to communicate on that level without serious judgment of the other person. But many people can't discuss difficult concepts. And if you're able to do that, it can be very, very frustrating. It's often a cause of conflict in marriage. I see it all the time, where one person wants to go down a path of really discussing intimate things, and the other person is just not able to. They're not doing it dafka, they just can't. For some people, it's just that they're just emotionally not present, and when they learn to be present, then they're able to actually be much better.
Can a relationship work like that? If one person wants to talk on a deep level and another person can't?
Well, it depends what that person wants from that relationship. I think there are many relationships like that. So if both, because even the person who can't go deep can get very frustrated. You're always going on and on, or you're saying things that aren't relevant, or, so it can be difficult for both. Even the person who doesn't want to hear it might not like it and feel on the spot. But the person who wants that deep discussion can feel very frustrated. Whether it's a deal breaker in a marriage depends on the relationship, depends on the person. So some people, just manage without that. They get that need met in a different way, and it's something missing in the marriage, but there's a lot of other good stuff. So it depends on the person. Whereas some people, it's a deal breaker. It's so important to them that they couldn't stay with someone who's not able to share that. So it's something often, if people are dating, to think about. If you pick up that person's not like that, not to hope they're suddenly going to become like that, to think about how important is it for me, and if it is important, it's unlikely to change. Yeah. In one of her other books, she talks about thinking types and feeling types, and she has that as a criteria for couples who are dating. The thinking types, Miriam Adahan, I can't remember which book it is, but she says that thinking types and feeling types get very frustrated with each other. So if someone loves to talk about feelings, they're often attracted to someone who's very, cognitive and academic, but after a while it wears thin. Then they want to be emotional again. So often we're attracted to something we're not so good at, but then after a while it becomes uncomfortable. So it's an interesting thing to just be aware of that. Yeah. And the same with friendships. Often we're thrown together with people we have a shared interest, but when we want to go deeper, or when it comes to reciprocating friendships or meals or whatever, that's lacking. And there's a disappointment because it was such fun when we played netball together, but now I want to go deeper or further, and this relationship can't move there. So, but the big thing is not to judge people, to really accept that everyone is different, but to know what our needs are and to prioritize our needs and see if we can get that need met. So she says, here is a quick icebreaker. If you are in a temperamental deadlock with someone, one quick way of getting into contact is to say, tell me 2 things you like about me, and I'll tell you 2 things I like about you. And then say, now that we're on a positive wavelength, let's talk about this conflict. So what she's saying is, when you're yelling and screaming, I do this a lot with couple therapy, I'll often spend some of the session getting them to focus on something positive. And I can tell you it's often very, very difficult. Very difficult. You can ask someone, is there something you do appreciate about your wife or your husband? And then there's this long silence, and then it makes the other person feel worse. Because they're really the one who's going, oh my gosh, what can I think of? But it's a really good one to think about, if you're not getting on, to actually go, let's leave that topic for now, and let's just actually focus on what's good. Let me tell you what I appreciate about you. And you go first. Always a good idea for you to go first. And then hopefully your friend or your partner will reciprocate. And then when things are warmer and you're seeing the good in each other, then you've got if you like, a container that you can now sit down and say, can we talk about that tough topic? Otherwise, if you're just hammering away at that tough topic and there's nothing to hold it, it just becomes more and more destructive. So in general, one of the things that, we talk here a lot about is you can't change other people, but also what you've heard me say many times is to really think about, is it worth going down that path? Is what you're trying to achieve worth maybe the pain and the heartache that you're going to dredge up for both of you? And sometimes the answer is absolutely, and you should. But sometimes it's actually you can live without it. And you weigh up the cost and the benefit, that the damage I'm going to do to go down this path and insist on this discussion might not be worth it. Only you can decide. There's no one answer. But to really be wise and objective and think about it. Because there are many, many things that we can actually manage without doing, and there are many, many things we can find different ways of solving. Especially when you, let's say, you have people with different love languages.
It's just going to say that.
Yeah. So sometimes, you want to go down that path, but the person doesn't have that love language, but they will show you their love and affection in a different way. And then we can be mature enough to accept that love without insisting it's done in my language. That's really important. So we always prioritize the whole relationship. But if you do, as I say, if you are in a temperamental deadlock, become positive, focus on the good in the relationship, get something really good and strong and warm happening between you, and then sit down and look at the conflict. If we use her tool, total view, where the total view is positive, but there's just one issue we're going to talk about. Whereas when you're angry all the time and complaining, it feels like the total view is negative. So you want to make the total view positive. So some general rules for good communication. To encourage self-disclosure, listen to the other person carefully. Avoid judgments and evaluations when a person is sharing pain. Avoid comments like, "It's not true that you're trapped or unappreciated." So that's something I hear very often. Someone says to their partner, "I feel very unappreciated," and they go, "Oh, rubbish, you're not." You completely invalidate that person. Accept people's feelings. You can't tell someone you're not that anxious. I had this last week with someone. This woman was saying how anxious she is when she's around his mother. And he said, "No, you're not. You're not so anxious." And she was going, "Well, I do. I shake." And he said, "No, you don't." Yeah. So if someone says they're anxious, they're anxious. You can fight about facts if you really want to, but you need to accept people's feelings. Don't argue with them.
Just a matter of interest, what did you say to him?
Well, in general, I'm teaching him active listening. So it's just one thing. He's definitely got ADHD. He interrupts all the time. She cannot finish a sentence. Okay. So we literally sort of keep going back to just, can he sit quietly and actually listen whilst he finishes a sentence, and then actively listen and reflect on what she says. So you've got to teach a skill like that. Yeah. But I don't think at this point he would even hear that it wouldn't even know what invalidating is, because he's just battering away and talking, and it can be the most minute thing. It's interesting. The cup was there. No, it wasn't. It was 1 inch to the left. They're fighting over minutiae, but she can't finish what she's even saying. So there's so much. But the good thing is that he loves the sessions and he keeps coming back. So that's strong. The strong part of the relationship. No, I'm quite tough on him. I'm very tough on him. No, because often people would have dropped out by now because I keep having to stop him. So I've had people before who leave. They get very frustrated because they want to just get their way and tell everybody, me and her, what's going on. So even though I'm tough on him, he keeps coming back. So hopefully, I'm a little bit optimistic, yeah. Get on the people's same side as them, where you might say something like, "I'd probably feel the same way if I was in your shoes," or "I can see you having a really rough time." So that's an interesting way of putting it. Not "I've been there and I also have that." It's not that. It's actually going, "I can see where you're coming from and why that would be painful for you." That's what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from. You don't have to agree. And you don't have to say, "I've been through it, been there, done that." It's none of that. Avoid labeling or name calling. Don't throw out words like "stop being crazy" or "hysterical" or "paranoid" or "slob" or "nagging witch." So that's often what happens, right?
Personality disorder.
Yeah, that's right. Now it's like, "you narcissistic." That's the new one now, right? Everyone's abusive and narcissistic. That's true. We don't use little ones like crazy anymore. We've got specific diagnoses. Try to understand the other person's point of view and get him to understand yours by role reversal. I don't really love this method. I find people can use it like to dig. But if you can, you might want to go, look, this is how it feels. And you might do a bit of role reversal. She suggests it's with children as well. I don't love it. But if I do some time in supervision with students, so if you're in a relationship where you're trying to, or you want to understand, let's put maybe the other way is better, you're wanting to understand. So you go, okay, let's role reverse. Let me pretend I'm you and you me, and let me see what it feels like. So if you feel okay to do that, that is a method. Stay in the present. This is crucial. Don't be diverted from your goal of understanding and problem solving. If the other person tries to divert you with excuses, defenses, previewing the future, or reviewing the past, come back to the present problem. And that's a key part of good communication. And this is what normally happens. You start arguing about the dish in the sink, and it ends up to what happened 20 years ago. Stick to the point. I don't like the dish in the sink overnight. I'd like it washed straight away. That is the issue. That's all you want to say. It doesn't get, but I think you're a slob, and in your family it was accepted, and your mother does the same thing, and I asked you this on our wedding day, and we go right back. Just stick to the point. Good communication, you have a goal, you want to get through one particular thing, and rather solve that than bring in all the years of anger and resentment, because then you're not going to get anything.
But what happens to the person that you're telling that then starts giving you a hard time?
And then you just repeat and go, can we just go back to the dish in the sink? I don't want to talk about that now. We can talk about that another day. I just want to finish about the dish in the sink. Yeah. Whatever the issue is. State precisely what you want without excessive drama. For example, I want 5 minutes of your time to share the day's events each night. So often how we lose people, I keep talking from the point of view of wives, but obviously it applies to everyone. But as women here, we can understand it. So what we might do is, instead of saying to our husband, I want 5 minutes of your time every day when you come home, we go, I'm just sick of it. You never give me any time. You've got more time for your friends, and you're busy with the kids, and I'm last on your priority list. Even the dog gets more attention than me, and we go on and on and on. And then what we're actually asking for, we're never going to get it either. So even though you have all those emotions, if you want to communicate something, I would like to spend time with you every day, then just communicate that. Leave all the stuff out, because people become deaf when you start telling them how bad they are. I want you to help me in the kitchen for 10 minutes after dinner. I'll set the timer so you'll know I won't ask for more. Please keep the kids quiet when I'm studying. Unless you feel overwhelmed, then tell me and I'll help. Reassure others of your love and concern. Don't assume that people automatically know it or don't need words of endearment or endorsement. Every positive expression is like a candle that expels the darkness of temper. And this is a huge thing, is people, especially when they're in relationships, they stop telling each other appreciative things. And so much of the communication is about chores, who's washing up the dishes, who's taking the kids, who's transferring the money, it's all about who's booking the tickets. It becomes that, and it becomes issues. And for whatever reason, in most relationships, after a while, people stop telling each other, I appreciate you, I care about you, I see what you're doing, validating. So you want that to be the majority of your discussion. As I said, you want the total view to be positive. So when someone feels appreciated, again, it's not a cause and effect, but when the whole atmosphere is appreciative and caring, and then you're talking about a dish, it has a whole different thing. But if you've stopped caring or telling each other you care about each other, the dish becomes a symbol of the relationship, of how neglected. So we're not talking about, obviously, when a relationship really is falling apart. But these are important things. In the old days, the expression was, you take each other for granted. And that's what starts to happen. So build it into your everyday vocabulary. When someone in your family does something for you, always say thank you. Notice what they do. Validate them. Be positive around people all the time. Think about if it's really necessary to complain about something or criticize or argue. And if that's in the minority, that communication will be heard much, much more. And you'll have a much happier home life and much happier friendships. Friends as well. People don't appreciate each other after a while. They stop actually saying nice things to each other. And it's a pity. It's a pity. You just, as I say, get used to whatever's going on. Accept individual differences and don't see disagreements or failure to implement your desires as a sure sign of the other person's lack of love for you. And this is a huge one. Some people are by nature and or conditioning more efficient, more confident, more communicative, more expressive, more organized than others. If someone lacks awareness or skills, teach, don't preach, discuss, don't dictate. So this is something we often speak about. Don't assume dafka. If someone leaves, I keep coming back to the dish in the sink because I hear that's so interesting. You know, you can hear couples from all different backgrounds and we all fight over the same thing. And the dish in the sink, whether it should be washed straight away or can be left till the next morning, honestly, I've heard it thousands of times. I'm not exaggerating. So people are different and they have a different value system. For some people, leave everything in the sink and after breakfast in the morning I'll do the lot. And other people want to wash as they go. And you can't think that that person is doing it deliberately to annoy you or to upset you or because they don't respect you or because they're a slob. They just either have a different value system or they work in a different style. We are all different. So giving the benefit of the doubt is we accept that they're individual differences. And then you have to decide how you want to work with it. So when you are loving and accepting and you sit down and you go, okay, look, I see it differently to you. This is what I want to talk about. Let's find a way that we both can live with. Sometimes we let things go. Sometimes we insist. Everything will be different, but it's done without condemnations. Now I'm going to talk about the special problem of communication and emotionality between men and women. And it's really interesting because some people might be listening to this today and go, it's not politically correct to talk like this anymore, but I'm going to continue to do so. I think it's really a pity that we live in a world now where we don't even know what gender we are. You can now choose on a form. It's not just 2 genders or even 3. There's now, I don't know how many there can be, there's an other. I don't know, so you can have like 3 or 4 on a list and then an other. So I don't know what all the genders are, but why it's really a pity is because when it's clear if you're a man or a woman, and we have seen over, well, certainly in the Jewish world, generations of wisdom of how women think and behave and how men think and behave, and men can be taught to understand their wives better and vice versa, it brings harmony. But when no one knows who they are or who the other is and what to call each other and how they think, it actually becomes more and more confusing.
It's complicated. It's chaotic.
So it's chaos. That's a good word, yeah. So honestly, there's so much wisdom about men and women. And one of the things, you know, many, many years ago, I'll never forget when I was, probably when I was becoming from in the 70s, it was also the time of sort of sexual freedoms that had really opened up. So when I was at uni, it was the beginning of people starting to live with their boyfriends. Like in 1971, 72, there were a few people in my class that it was like a new thing and not everyone was okay with it, but it had started. In the 60s, people didn't live openly with their boyfriends. So there was this whole thing with the Vietnam War and much more sexual freedoms and so on. And I was fascinated when I became from how much is written in the Torah and by rabbis about sexuality and the importance of having a good intimate life. And a lot of it, if you read it, is all about, I would say the majority actually, is written to men about how to treat their wives. And how men and women are different, and men need to respect the fact that their wives are different. So I'll just give you one example. It was written by the Saadia Gaon, I think it was in the 1300s. So we're talking about a long, long, long time ago. And he writes about how he's talking about mikveh night can be any night if a man wants to be intimate with his wife, that he needs to really pay her a lot of attention all day, that basically shouldn't expect at the end of the day he comes home and hop into bed and wham bam and it's over, then he needs to understand that a woman needs intimacy, and he needs to talk to her about subjects that interest her. He needs to show her that he's interested in her as a human being. He even
Just
talks.
that day.
No. He's just saying in general.
Every day.
Good question.
Well, he's talking about in particular with intimacy, but in general, you're quite right. Yeah. But he's saying it because that's an area where people do feel that they're just treated like an object. So he's talking about just understanding the differences, and that women need a lot of. It's for foreplay, really. It's the whole idea of treating her like a person and a human being and feeling close, and then that's just an extension of that, and not just using her as a sexual being. So, whereas men obviously don't need to do that. They can hop into bed and they're ready to go. So this is the kind of difference that we can talk about, right? And that's what I was trying to say. There's so much wisdom about men and women, and unfortunately we've lost a bit of it because we live in a world now, as I say, where it's chaos, right? So in general, men are socialized not to express their emotions freely or to value emotional expression as much as women. So this, I think, has shifted a little bit, but it's still not 100%, and there's a lot of work to get men to be more emotional. Men tend to see the exchange of information as more important than contact communication. So words of endearment, sympathy, and support, women are much better at that. And there's actually a Gemara that talks about women. It says that 10 parts of speech were given to the world, 9 parts were given to women, and 1 part was given to men. And, the joke given is women talk much more than men. But what it means is that, in general, women are better communicators, like in this way. And that's why women often understand their children more and are the ones that will guide their husbands. Your daughter's feeling lonely, go and talk to her, or you need to be less harsh with the child. That's a very common thing that goes on in families. Men are better. I don't know in what percentage, because even though we're saying that, I think that it's in a very small demographic. It might be in our demographic where men have become more emotional and they go for therapy. But at the same time, we have got this increase of misogyny like we've never had before, an increase of rape, and women are having to talk about consent and absolutely disgusting misogyny. So I don't know how much really it's changed. I think it's in a sort of if I can say, an elite group, people who can afford therapy and can think about it, but I'm not sure if it's in the majority. I can't be more I can't prove it, but it's just a feeling, when I deal with a lot of men and they are abusive, and because they're not, you say, every day, I find that intimate lives have never been worse, because sex has become such a thing. If you meet the woman that you're going to marry at a bar and the first night you sleep together, and it's all from the thigh, from the hips down, there's no real intimacy, and it takes off from there, it becomes very difficult to wind it back to have an emotionally connect. So sex often ends up staying that way. It's like a 5-minute episode every now and then. Sorry?
And generally drunk or something.
That's right. That's right. It's very and women's needs are not taken into account in all of this. So it's true, women are drinking more than ever and participating in this. It's not real intimacy from a Torah point of view. So again, I'd love to think it's more, but I'm not 100% convinced it is. I actually feel there's a bit of a swing back, actually. So if the gap in communication style is very great, it is wise to see a counselor. The lack of an emotionally fulfilling relationship is profoundly painful to a feeling individual. So if you're a feeling type and you can't communicate, it's very important that you find a way to do that. But again, I suppose the short message of this is, on that journey, do it in a way without condemnations, do it in a way that there's a lot of positivity around, do it in a way that you focus on the message. You'll have more chance that you'll get what you want than if we do it in an angry, critical, nagging, on and on kind of way. Choose your moment, doing all the things we're talking about will help that communication. Okay. So I also think that communication in general has decreased. And we were talking earlier about sending messages to friends, and we call that asynchronous communication. So in the book, The Anxious Generation, he talks about a big part of anxiety. He's talking about the smartphone, but he talks about all the different aspects of it. It's not just the internet, or it's not just about what people have access to. He says it's this asynchronous communication. So someone can send you a message, and then you can take 3 or 4 days to reply. And often when you get a message, and then so let's say you're the one who gets it after 3 days, it doesn't feel like the person is responding to your message to them. And so it can be very anxiety provoking. He's talking about children growing up. You send your friend a message, do you want to come with me to the party? And then you don't hear from them. That stirs up unbelievable anxiety. Am I out of the group?
And you see they've gone with someone else.
But even if they haven't, you just don't know. Did they see the message? Actually, I can relate to this totally. Did they see the message? Are they ignoring me?
I know they carry their phone around 24/7.
Mm-hmm. Double ticks. When did they read it? You can check.
So I've got to be very careful what I say, because I was saying something about one of our kids recently, and she came back to me and she said, I believe you were talking about me in the year. And I said, and I was trying to explain what I think I'd said. She said, no, I'm not upset about it. So I don't want to say who it is that doesn't answer their messages. There's a number of people in my life don't answer their messages. But it is, especially when you're excited about something, you go, did you see this photo? And then no one responds, and you go, well, I don't think they're doing it horribly, but it's a whole different thing when you're with someone and you go, let's look at the photo together, and you're both excited. That's synchronous communication. So because we have this asynchronous communication, things are much, much worse. And I have many couples who communicate by text and by email. So I don't know how many, but many. So for quite a few years, I've had couples who in the morning, if they want to communicate, they do it by email. So the wife will send an email in the same house. But if there are things to be done, she's found it more efficient to send it by email, then he responds. Yeah.
I actually agree.
Yeah.
Then you don't get aggravated. You've sent it, and then they can't. And I think even with your children, I think sometimes it's better.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you talk, it's misconstrued.
Yeah.
Or it gets heated.
Yeah.
And I think then at least there's no tone. There's the lesser tone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. There are advantages.
There are
for
tones
sure.
if you put capitals or
Yeah.
exclamations.
Depends what they use and which.
But also you can't read into them sometimes.
Yeah, you can't sometimes got its pros.
You don't know what But or otherwise I'll have some of the patients will show me on their phone that a barrage of texts. So let's say one is angry with the other one. Through the night they'll send a barrage. I don't know, 50 texts of you this, you that, and you wake up in the morning to this barrage.
I also think it's easier to hide behind the text, and that's the problem as well. Because there's certain things that you probably wouldn't say face to face. It's very easy to put it in your text.
So maybe communication is actually a dying art. We're talking about it here, and this is what we need to work on doing, but it actually is a dying art because of all
Maybe
these.
communication is changing, the type of communication.
Maybe the type, but if we're talking about more intimate conversations, especially words of endearment, I have no doubt that it's better face to face, but also with conflict as well. It is much better it's one thing to send a list of instructions by email, fetch the kids at this, do that, whatever. But if you have something serious to say to someone, it's like years ago someone said, should you break off a relationship with a text?
Okay, don't break my heart, it happened.
No, we had a story once of somebody who sent his wife a text. They were married for maybe close to 30 years. And he used to go for a walk on a Sunday morning, and he sent his wife a text at about 11 and said, don't wait for me for dinner tonight. And she wrote back and said, what's happening? Are you going out? He said, no, I'm not coming home again. And that's how he broke off the marriage, yeah. I know. So the thing is to work on the communication, but to be aware, I think we've got extra challenges actually, because more and more people are doing it differently. So it's how do we incorporate this wisdom, this knowledge, given all the technology. So it's about balancing them both and finding a way to do them both, because good communication is key to every good
So we can still
relationship.
say in our generation, we know